90% of the criticism the United States gets comes from only looking at the liability side of the balance sheet. They never look at the asset side of the balance sheet. We're the ones draining the LBMA right now. I turned to the 10-year U.S. Treasury bond. It's going to close this week under 4%. We're moving into a stagflationary environment. Is it deflation or is it inflation? It's both. Asset-based deflation, commodity price inflation.
I want to get back on the conversation of your plan that you laid out in 2019 that's all coming true. Go ahead and lay out the rest of the plan for us from there.
Well,
all right, Tom Luongo, what a pleasure to have you back on the show. You know, this has been scheduled for a while, and I would just say that there's probably no one else that's better to talk to today on what's going on. So, Tom, let me frame this up, and I want to see where you want to take this, because I had like one agenda, and now the week we're recording this on actually 9/11. We're recording this on 9/11/2025. I feel almost like that moment in 9/11 in 2025 where it's like, wow, the world just changed. But I just got back from England. They're blowing out over there. The gilt market is blowing out. Their bond market, they've lost control. The BOE keeps cutting rates, and yet the long end of the curve is running away.
Yep.
The political system is being completely overrun by immigrants. It's like a powder keg where they have this like Operation Raise the Colors. So like Englishmen are raising the English flag, and it's like racism, which is kind of crazy. On the other side, we have what I thought was really interesting in Nepal. Supposedly they banned social media. They burned the parliament building down. They're like killing the leaders over there in Nepal. In France, you have, I'm just framing this up for everybody, and then we'll see where we're going to jump in. In France, we have Macron's government failed to survive this no confidence vote. I think it's the fourth PM in like 12 months they've run out. They have this massive growing debt crisis, and it's kind of the same thing as everywhere. They wanted to try to bring austerity in. People aren't for that. Now they have this block everything movement. Left and right seem to be joining together on that. So that's kind of like what's happening in maybe like the West. And then I just got back from China. I was there as they were preparing for this landmark military parade. And you have the leaders of Russia and North Korea there with Xi. Xi is saying that humanity is once again faced with critical choices: peace or war, dialogue or confrontation. And then Trump goes on to say, I guess we lost India and Russia to China. Good regards to Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin conspiring against the USA. So this is like, this whole world seems like a powder keg. And then here in the United States, we had this brutal killing that just happens way too often in North Carolina on public transit. Irina, a Ukrainian woman who came here seeking safety and unfortunately didn't find it. And then we had Charlie Kirk yesterday. I mean, the world is just a powder keg everywhere. And I'm gonna do one more quote, and then I'm gonna see where you want to jump in here.
Sure.
Because we mainly talk about finance, but finance is related to all of this. And actually, there was a video clip I saw of Charlie Kirk saying that his number one focus was de-radicalization. And he said, what do you think happens when you own nothing and there's no hope and your money's losing purchasing power? You turn to radicalization, and he said that that's my single focus. And so we typically talk about money here, but I'm going to end with one more quote. You retweeted a post from VBL Ghost, and you said, if the woke movement is a Marxist revolution, it is, in parentheses, and if that's true, then we are in the process of approaching a 1967 Shanghai storm moment when the monster they've created on the left is out of their control and needs to be put down. So these are political, these are societal, and these are financial revolutions that all seem to converge at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, you picking out my my retweet of my good friend Vince Lanci. Gotta like that, because Vince has been. It's interesting. Like it was funny. Vince actually admitted the other day, and whenever I do a thing with Vince, I'll weed into all the other stuff you just talked about in a second. But whenever Vince and I get together to do a podcast together, we chat for 45 minutes before we record, then we record for an hour and a half, and then we chat for 45 minutes afterwards. And Vince is cute, because yesterday, the day before on Twitter, he finally said, somebody said, dude, it's really interesting that you're starting to talk like this and go right there. And he's like, yeah, well, you got Tom Luongo to thank for that, because, we usually talk about this stuff behind the scenes, but he draws it out of me. I can't help it. I'm like, yeah, I know. I do that to people. And I just wear my heart on my sleeve, Mark. You know how that is.
Yeah.
Okay. So yes, you're not wrong that it feels like the whole world is trying to spin out of control. And I'll be honest with you, as far as I'm concerned, that's a feature, not a bug, of the system that we have that we're watching collapse. Um, and it's collapsing, and they know it's collapsing, so they need to try and create as much chaos as possible because they really do believe that during the chaos they can set all the people against each other, fighting amongst themselves, black, white, red, blue, Iranian, Israeli, I don't care, Brits, Muslims, it doesn't matter.
Right.
Set everybody else in motion while the elite make movements scot-free in the background, create the next architecture for whatever they're going to put together next, and then, then overpay the gendarme, for lack of a better term, to come in and assholes and elbows and take care of and whack everybody and restore order. Now, at the same time, the reason that this is going on, and I firmly believe this, and you have to, and I'm going to stick to my guns on this, is because Donald Trump has told them no. Now, is the United States going to be some bastion of libertarian freedom? No, it's not. But what Donald Trump has told them is absolutely not. We're not following that path. This is our independence from the old colonial powers of Europe. And if you look at the way he's treated the European leaders when they came to Washington and forced them to struggle session for peace while they machinate for war, if you watch the way he's struggle sessioned everybody, I mean, he entertained Keir Starmer, the sitting prime minister of the United Kingdom, in his castle, Trump's castle in Scotland, on land that is nominally owned or ruled by Keir Starmer. I keep wanting to call him Keir Stalin because it's true.
Yeah, it's about the same.
I have an even worse term for him than that, but I'll keep it relatively clean today. Remember that Mr. Starmer got off of Trump's U.S. Navy helicopter. Trump wouldn't even allow the RAF to bring him to Scotland. Okay, and then that was right after he brought in Ursula von der Leyen and gave her terms of EU's financial surrender, which is what he forced him he forced her to sign.
Right.
Of course, von der Leyen thought, sign whatever it is that she wanted to, because she's thinking to herself, like the rest of these Davosian catamites, that, well, we're going to force Trump into war and we're going to wait him out and we're just going to do what we want in 2 years anyway. It doesn't matter because we're going to kill all of his support system around him. They're acting exactly the same way they did last summer before they tried to shoot him, or where they did shoot him and missed. But they were all running around like not a care in the world.
Right.
Last summer. And even this summer, watching Starmer, on his government collapsing around him, and Home Secretary resigns over something, they bring somebody else in who's even worse, right? Losing in the polls, they don't care about public support, doubling down on every bad policy. This is not accidental. These people aren't incompetent. They're hyper competent at being vandals. And I've been saying this for years, as long as you and I have been, chatting on and on for the 3 or 4 years we've known each other.
Yep.
I think it's probably 4 now. Christ, it's been that long. They're vandals. They know exactly what they're doing. And so Vince's tweet that you quoted earlier is exactly correct.
Right.
They've been building this for years. They are now just in burn it all down mode. And they were in maintain everything mode last summer in the weeks leading up to Butler, Pennsylvania, right? Biden-Trump debate. We're going to use that as the inciting incident to get rid of Biden. They call for snap elections in France. They call for snap elections in Great Britain. They put the people in power they want there. They start the process of liquidating both countries, and then we're going to kill Trump, and then we're going to have Nikki Haley versus Kamala Harris. That was their plan, and then Trump lived.
Yep.
Now they've been in scramble mode ever since then. So the reality of the situation is, of course, very simple. It's, if we can't have it, nobody can. So, no, Donald Trump, you're not going to come and save England and the rest of the Commonwealth. You're not going to save Canada. We're going to put our high priest of Debogian ecumenical environmentalism in charge of Canada. And then we're going to destroy what's left of Canada. Because we can see you cutting us off from, well, we cut ourselves off from Russian gas. We can see you cutting us off from Saudi gas and Azeri gas and North Africa and everything else. So we cut ourselves off from British gas and British oil off the North Slope. This is why Liz Truss was deposed 3 years ago. Like, they can see what's happening. So Canada's their last refuge. Canada's always been their refuge. It's always been the antipode to undermine the United States from the North. As you know, my friend Matt Ehret said to me the other day on a podcast we did together, Canada's is the insurrection against the United States from the North that won, as opposed to the secession against the United States from the South that lost. Okay, when you think about the history of the 19th century, the whole world's being set on fire on purpose because Donald Trump has made it abundantly clear we're not going to fight a war for Israel in the Middle East, and we're not going to fight a war for the British and the French in Ukraine to destroy Russia. The problem for Trump is that he also wants to see Israel survive. And so what the British are now doing is they've turned on their Israeli partners, or, subsidiary, whatever you want to call them. As far as I'm concerned, they're cutting off this Israeli subsidiary. Netanyahu is going around and liquidating all the assets around the region that are a threat to Israel, because I think he realized after 10/7, I'm going back now, I'm reframing the last couple of years of Netanyahu's behavior, and I feel dirty by saying anything positive about that man, because I despise him, okay? With the core of my being, I know he's a sinister and ugly man, and I know that everything after the but is what's true. This is what I'm getting at. That was the past. This is now the present. And the present is that 10/7 was a Qatari Hamas operation against Israel, probably created and organized by MI6 to radicalize the Israelis and start the conflict, and to start the spiral down that we have, and to get the Israelis to go freaking bananas and want to wipe out every Palestinian on the planet. Of course, their reaction is over the top. Of course, their reaction is disgusting. But focusing on their reaction is missing the inciting incident in the casus belli, and missing the modus operandi of the people that take, as my friend Alex Craner likes to put it, take the black ants and the red ants, put them in a jar and shake them up together.
Yeah.
Okay. And the Israelis are part of that process. Okay. And then that's going to set everything in motion to then set them against Iran. Shake the ant jar again. Now it's against Turkey. Shake the ant jar again. But one of the things you can say about this, the kind of unfocused aggression that we're seeing in recent days from Netanyahu, was that these are very targeted strikes against other British-backed assets, like Turkey and the radical Islamists that are in charge in Damascus, like the Qataris in Doha. Okay? Because that's where City of London wants to move to.
Every day we see headlines about inflation and debt and diminishing control over our own money. That's why I always come back to Bitcoin, because it's built for generations. It's built for legacy. But protecting your Bitcoin legacy the right way, it's not always simple. It demands discipline, focus, and the right partner. Now that's why I personally use Unchained Signature. It's a premium private client service for serious Bitcoin holders who want expert guidance, resilient custody, and an enduring partnership. Now with Signature, you're paired with your own dedicated account manager, someone who understands your goals, helps you every step of the way. You're gonna get white glove onboarding, same day emergency support, personalized education, reduced trading fees, and priority access to exclusive events and features. Unchained's collaborative custody model is designed to provide the same security as the world's biggest Bitcoin custodians, but for those who prefer to hold their own keys. Now, I've been using and recommending Unchained for years. I even got my parents to set up with them. So if you want to get set up, check out Unchained Signature at unchained.com/MarkMoss. And as a loyal listener, I got a discount for you. Just use code MOSS10 at checkout to get 10% off your first year, because your Bitcoin isn't just for life, it's for generations.
So you can almost see that, like, at the last moment, Netanyahu saw that Israel was going to be completely betrayed and said, oh, no, we're not going there. Because like Netanyahu or don't like Netanyahu, and I don't, but I can understand his mindset if you're willing to, like, put yourself into his mind for a minute, which is that this guy, at the end of the day, remember, his brother died at Entebbe, as my friend Dexter Light will remind me all the time. He's got a certain ethos, and that ethos is Israel, for better or for worse, right? Now, Israel has always been a British construct, but, you know, the last 10 years worth of behavior and relations between Israel, the EU, Britain, and the region have been very complicated, right? And there are forces in Israel and the Israeli government system and the Israeli political system that are clearly against Netanyahu, and they're backed by Europe. Oh, Naftali Bennett. So when you start getting into the things, and what I'm getting at here is I'm not trying to absolve Israel of anything. Obviously, they're committing whatever you want to call it, genocide or whatever. I don't care. Call it whatever you want. The eradication of the Palestinians in Gaza. Okay? I don't care. And we can have, and we can all feel horror and shame at all of it. But you look at the why this is creating why we're getting to the powder keg moment is exactly this. Everybody's being radicalized on some irrational bit of violence that's being paraded in front of us on a day-to-day basis, whether it is Israel's, attacks on the Gazans, whether it's that poor girl on the bus in Charlotte, or Charlie Kirk, or this, or the insanity that's happening in the streets, all over England, or in Ireland, or in all
major cities in
the United States. Like, it's happening everywhere. And all of this is policy. The question is, whose policy? Who benefits from this? So you ask yourself the basic question of who benefits from it. No, it's the people who are literally in the process of losing all their power. Because if Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, and Xi Jinping get together and recarve up the world, who doesn't have a seat at the table? It's the same thing I've been saying for 4 years. And I'm sorry, but that heuristic works better than everybody else's heuristic, like it's all the Jews or it's all this, or none of that is fully explanatory. And for people who want to see a better world, you have to understand the game board, understand the players and the motivations, so you can see that where we're going to wind up on the other side, because we have to be able to predict their moves. It doesn't matter whether we hate the moves that they're making and we hate the game that we're playing. Don't hate the player, hate the game.
Yeah.
Right?
So who doesn't have a seat? England and the EU?
Yeah. I mean, do they have any collateral? Do they have any energy? Do they have any innovation? Do they have any people? Do they have a birth rate? No, they have nothing. You know what they have? They have bureaucracy and shame.
Yeah.
That's what they've got. And violence.
Yeah. Now, obviously, this is culminated right now, and you mentioned all these players from Trump and Bibi, et cetera, but a lot of this seems to be decades in the making. So as I kind of started out by saying, we're sort of at this maybe long end of this 80-year credit cycle where now the bond markets across the developed world are all blowing out. I mean, obviously, with England, as I said, right, the gilt market's blowing out while the BOE keeps trying to lower rates. We're seeing this kind of across the board. So, I mean, how much of this is just sort of this culmination of this long-term destruction of the monetary system versus this game board catalyst of or maybe they're realizing the game is almost up, so now we have to reshuffle the deck real quickly to kind of figure out who gets that seat next.
Well, yeah, that's what they're doing. Every time the British Empire gets in trouble, they want to default on their debt and start over again, or in Europe or whatever. Remember, as Martin Armstrong likes to point out all the time, and I've had the great pleasure of getting to know Marty over the past few months, so it's been fun bouncing a lot of these ideas off of him, and actually bouncing a lot of his ideas back off of him, and being, which is to say that what is America's superpower? It's the fact that we've never defaulted on our debt.
Sure,
we've always paid our debts, even if we've gone through inflations and we've paid it. We've never ever defaulted on a QSIP. We've always paid our
We did default on the gold. We did default on paying back the gold in 1971.
Well, yeah, but did we or were the freaking French running an operation using our trade deficit and our tax dollars that were going to France through the Marshall Plan to take all of our freaking gold because the Gauls hated us more than Macron does, because that's what they did, Mark. I'm going to reframe that whole argument by the libertarians, who I used to be, by saying, oh, by the way, that was our tax money. That was the Marshall Plan that created a durable trade advantage, positive trade flow towards France, who then de Gaulle, who hated the United States, was then draining our money. So we're rebuilding France, and he's redeeming his trade surplus, which we paid for, by stealing our gold. Yeah, no, you don't get any more. I'm over it. Like, I'm over that whole argument. Like, yes, do we need to go back on a gold standard to some form or another? Yes. And are we in the process of doing so? Yes. And you know who's going to do that? Who's going to lead that charge? It ain't the Chinese. It ain't the Russians. It ain't the Indians. It ain't BRICS. It ain't anybody else. It's us, because we're the ones draining the LBMA right now. We're the ones knocking down City of London. They're the ones that ran the gold scam for 50 years to prop up, prop up the dollar as the world's reserve currency. And they did it. It's 90% of the entire gold manipulation system was run out of the LBMA and the COMEX. But it all starts at the LBMA, and it all starts there and being there in Zurich.
Yeah. That's interesting that you say that. I mean, to the point about the revaluing gold, or going back to this gold system. Certainly a lot of people see this. I like to follow Luke Grauman pretty closely, and he's been talking about this for quite a while, and how he says it's really China and the BRICS that are starting to kind of push the price of gold back up.
Of course he does, because Luke has never met a talking point about finance that has ever been positive towards the United States. I've told Luke this on Twitter. I'm like, dude, come on.
Well, he has told me, in his defense, I mean, he's not here and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he has told me that he sees that the U.S. also sees this coming to a head, and if they don't preempt the move by China, then they kind of have that last mover advantage. So, potentially he sees a chance for the U.S. to
It's the first mover advantage, because we're the ones draining the LBMA. We're the ones. I said this 4 years ago when we started raising interest rates. I said, it's what's going to bake everybody's noodles, that the United States is going to be the one that sees the gold price rise. And what's going to bake everybody's noodles, watching the Fed put Bitcoin on their balance sheet. Well, that didn't quite come true. But did the United States embrace crypto as a means by which to collateralize their debt?
Yeah. It's coming.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Luke didn't say that 4 years ago. I did. Luke goes on to Tucker Carlson for 45 minutes and does nothing but complain. No solutions to the problem. I gave you the roadmap to the solution. I hate to toot my own horn here, but I'm going to do so. I gave everybody because I'm really angry about this stuff. Not because I didn't get the credit. I don't give a the credit. What I care about is trying to fix the problem. And I gave everybody the roadmap. They all called me crazy. Fine, I don't care about being called crazy.
Well, let's lay it out.
About is that the fact that the roadmap is now being laid out in front of us, and people are still arguing like it's 2019. And it's staring you in the face that is not what's happening. Brent Johnson is more correct about all of this in the long run, and we all kind of agree. Yes, is there a problem in the United States in terms of the fiscal position, in terms of the debt, in terms of all these things? Yes, but has anybody looked as I have? At the end of the day, Mark, this is one of the things that really bothers me, because I've said it many times. I don't think I've said it to you personally because you and I haven't talked in almost a year.
Yep.
But think about this. I always said, look, 90% of the criticism that the United States gets comes from only looking at the liability side of the balance sheet.
Sure.
They never look at the asset side of the balance sheet. Okay? And the only asset anybody ever wants to look at is, of course, the tax flow, because that's the system, right?
Right.
The system is we issue taxes, we issue debt and pay for the interest on it with taxes, and that's how we fund the liquidity system, and that's how the system is supposed to work. That's how the credit system stays running, right? Well, that's the British model of central banking, debt, feudalism, slavery. Tariffs. Oh, and by the way, and we were operating where everybody else was tariffing us, but we weren't allowed to tariff them back. Why? Oh, because it's not fair, because you're got a better economy than us. I'm like, oh, shut up, loser.
Yeah.
Like, off. Like, I'm serious. Like, they've all been sitting here like freaking welfare queens for 85 freaking years complaining about this. And we rebuilt their societies.
But most people have no idea that those countries tariff us or why those tariffs were given to them in the first place.
I mean, and some of these tariffs, like the stuff between us and Canada, go back well before World War II and the Marshall Plan.
Right.
Okay? So understand that when you start to really think about the balance sheet of the United States, you start thinking about the assets, and you look at the way we've had to deal with environmental regulations and, cars and transportation and this and that, and all of this managerial bureaucracy that we all hate. What is that? That's a means by which to write the assets down behind those regulations to zero, so that you can't bring them to bear and put them against the liabilities. So all you're doing is you're saying, well, yeah, I mean, the United States is $37 trillion in debt and some number of unfunded liabilities and trillions in debt, but that's only if you take as given everything else. The regulations aren't going to change. The burden on the middle class, tax burden on the middle class, the regulatory burden on the middle class, and all that stuff is not going to change.
Right.
But now, is it happening fast enough for the radicals in the audience? Of course not, because the radicals in the audience are not grown-ups who wear pants. You know why? Because they don't understand. They can look and say, well, Donald Trump, he has a majority in the House and the Senate. No, he doesn't. He won the biggest landslide in modern electoral history, but he only won for a three-seat majority in the House. No,
right.
He won a 40-seat majority in the House, and they stole 37 of them. He won a 9-seat majority in the Senate, and they stole 6 of them. Because they were still ballot harvesting in December.
Yeah, crazy. But that's all being redrawn right now.
So he winds up in the same situation he has now, which is his biggest tail risk is a Congress that doesn't want to go along with his plans, either because they're bought and paid for, they're corrupt, or all of the above. So until that changes, he can only make certain moves. He can only make certain moves at the edges of the process. Now, take that one step further. He also had to go chapter and verse through the entire process of reasserting the Article 2 powers of the President of the United States and the Article 3 powers of the Supreme Court. And you do that by, well, we're gonna do this thing that we know they're going to issue an injunction against in some lower court. And then it's going to roll up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court's going to knock it down. Okay, well, that part of Article 2 has been reestablished. Okay, next thing. I saw something the other day. I think it was like Trump has won 18 or 19 times in the Supreme Court so far this summer. It was like Amy Coney Barrett finally came out and said, we're not rubber stamping his agenda. We're just interpreting the Constitution as written. These judges are insane. Okay? So this is what Article 2 means. And all of these lower courts don't really exist if the Congress says they go away tomorrow. So Congress is Trump's biggest tail risk. They know it. And so that's why their whole extended pretend thing has been running. So what I think is about ready to give way this fall is going to be, once the Supreme Court gets through the last few of these cases that are going to, the big ones that are going to reestablish that Donald Trump can actually fire just about everybody under the purview of the executive branch with stroke of the pen, law of the land. Okay? Same thing for all the money and everything else. And we're nearly there. We're about 85% there. There's like 3 or 4 more cases that need to be settled. I believe, something like that. And then once that happens, done. You're going to watch it occur. I've been speaking to guys over at like OMB and a couple other departments, and they're all like, oh yeah, we're just waiting. When you saw John Thune the other day finally say, hey, we're done. We're pushing through all of Trump's appointments. It was like 48 or 50.
Yeah, I saw that.
Guys. I mean, these are all important department heads and people that are necessary to run these agencies and to clean them up. And so when the totality of all that, excuse me, is to say Trump's writing up the value of these assets that are on the balance sheet. Once that's been done, now let's recalculate what the United States fiscal position is. And if anybody has a question about whether or not they're being successful to write those assets up in value, I turned to the 10-year U.S. Treasury bond. You're the one who brought it up, Mark. Thank you.
Just had a record.
Ready?
A record auction. Just had a record auction.
Go look at it. Like the 10-year is going to close today. Is going to close this week under 4%.
Yep.
And Powell's probably only got cut by 25 tomorrow because of the CPI that came out today. Like, and this started well before Jackson Hole when he changed the monetary policy. He got rid of the 2% inflation mandate, which, by the way, Powell never liked. Oh, by the way, he was a critic of it from the time that Bernanke put it in place when he was a junior member of the FOMC. So it was like the greatest thing that that's occurred in the last year, other than Trump getting.
Why would he only cut by 25 though? Because I thought with the record jobs blowout that we just had, the revision in the jobs report, the economy looks much worse than it is, and I thought he was looking at 50.
I'm not going to complain. I mean, I wanted him to cut by. I literally, as of this morning, before the CPI report, I have two reasons why I'm now moving back towards 25, and it's all because of the last 6 hours. Because we're doing this on the day the CPI came out. And I'll explain why in just a second. So yesterday I said I was doing my market report for my patrons, which I do on every Wednesday and every Sunday. And on Wednesday morning I said, okay, well, tomorrow's the CPI report. I've been charting the monthly close of the price of gasoline, futures price of gasoline, versus the 4-month rolling average of the month-over-month change in the CPI. So take the last 4 months of the CPI, roll that up and chart that against that same closing months reported, the same months close in the price of gasoline. And I ran, the last 9 years of that. And since COVID, since Powell started tightening, we've been in a commodity cost push inflation environment where directionally the two move in lockstep. Couple of months here or there where they weren't quite in lockstep, but for the most part, they've been in lockstep directionally. I mean, price of gasoline goes up, the CPI, the 4-month rolling average of the CPI goes up. So this month, for August, the close was was down 15 cents over the year over July. July was like $2.11 a gallon. Monthly closing gasoline was like $1.97. I'm like, my prediction. CPI is going to come in at about 0.1%, meaning it's going to roll over, proportionally with the price of gasoline.
Right.
Came up 0.4. But I did say, if it doesn't do that, two things. One, it's either we're moving into a stagflationary environment or potentially a demand pull environment, or the price of electricity from all these data centers that are coming online to run AIs are now the component of commodity cost push inflation, right? Because gasoline prices year over year were down 6.6%, but electricity prices year over year were up 13%. Piped natural gas was up 9%. That was like most of the CPI rise, whereas gasoline. So if it was just the gasoline story, like it has been up for the last 4 years, yeah, I would have been correct. So because the CPI is blowing out and the price of gasoline is falling, or at least is flat at around $2 a gallon, that tells you that we're maybe, if we get 2 or 3 months worth of data that confirms this trend, it's not a trend yet, just a data point, that we're in a different environment. And
we have much less inflation than we think.
Cut 25 as opposed to 50, because they're still going to play the inflation game.
When you say we're in a much different environment, does that mean that we actually have less environment than what the CPI tells us, or we have more?
What I mean is that we're moving into a different environment from the standpoint of the credit and inflation. Meaning, what I mean is, I think the most likely thing, but again, I can make two hypotheses here, that we're moving into what I would call a stagflationary environment. Now, I define stagflation differently than the rest of the world does because, well, the Phillips curve was always bullshit, which is how we defined the stagflation of the 70s. High unemployment with high inflation, because the Keynesian model said that can't possibly be true because the Phillips curve, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, the Phillips curve is always nonsense. We're in a different environment today. I've always said, whenever we get to a moment like this, is like post-2008, right? I remember like Peter Schiff versus Harry Dent debates from that back time. Is it deflation or is it inflation? I'm like, it's both. It's credit asset-based deflation. It's commodity price inflation. The two are going to meet. One, you've got a reorganization of the economy out of the hyper-financialized into the real economy. As you do that, you're now going to put upward pressure on commodity prices because the supply chains take time to build out. Therefore, the commodity cycles are always out of phase with the price. Therefore, you should start to see you should start to see a kind of a mean reversion. And that period is best then. And because of that, you're going to have high unemployment. You might have rising inflation, price inflation overall for the things that matter to people. People will complain about food inflation and housing inflation and whatnot. But home prices may fall. You know what I mean? Or,
yeah. I see on Trueflation today they're calling inflation at 2%. So
and it was
that's right on cue.
1.7 a couple of weeks ago. So I watch Trueflation every once in a while. I check in with it at interesting moments in time. So I think it's a good model, but I don't think it's perfect. But I think it's a better model than the CPI, certainly.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I want to take you back, and I want to get back on the conversation of your plan that you laid out in 2019. That's all coming true. So if I'm recapping this plan, part of this is all based off of we've only heard about the liabilities of the U.S. government. We haven't heard about the asset base.
Right.
So the first time I had heard that was Howard Lutnick, who came on the Trump administration on All In podcast, and he was talking about how, through his fund, he's, taken over all these different businesses, and when he comes and looks at these businesses, he looks at all the different assets and the balance sheets, and he's like, we all hear about the debt of the country, but we never once have heard about the asset base. Mm-hmm. And so I thought that was very interesting. And so what you're saying is, since 2019, you've been sort of looking at this. Now this is coming true. I heard Howard Lutnick talk about it. You're talking about ways that they could start to revalue some of those assets and come up with whatever that valuation is.
Sure.
And so, anyway, go ahead and lay out the rest of the plan for us from there.
Well, let's just start out there. This is when you start to open up federal lands for physical exploitation. Is when you used to rebuild the infrastructure of the country so that you improve the productive capacity of individual workers. You also have to recapitalize the middle class, and you've got to do that by opening up the small and medium banking regime, and that's where I think the stablecoin bills come in. But the big one is that you've got to open up the cash flow of the middle class, and how you do that is you've got to get Fannie and Freddie out of conservatorship. You've got to get them moving again. The libertarians are going to hate this, but unfortunately, this is the truth. The 30-year fixed rate mortgage is one of the greatest inventions in American history. The government-backed 30-year fixed rate mortgage is one of the great inventions of human history, because what it did was it opened up the productive capacity of the middle class to get a fixed cost on however much their mortgage was going to be, and then use that to then build businesses that created a higher return on investment over the course of the life of the loan, and thereby they were paying back their mortgage with depreciating money because they were making 5%. Their business was growing at 5% a year, and they were paying 3.5% on their mortgages. Now we could argue about the suppression of interest rates and risk and everything else, but the truth of the matter is that Fannie and Freddie were an unbelievably successful project until the weirdness of the early 2000s, and I've gotten to the point now where I honestly believe that was an operation. That the entire financial crisis of 2008 was designed from the ground up to destroy the 30-year mortgage and strip people of the ability to be able to buy a home, and then create a massive inflation that raised the price of a home to way beyond what anybody could afford. And the terms were so onerous, 25-30% down, massive changes to underwriting rules. I've been fighting with Wells Fargo for a couple of months now, practically, as a small business owner, because I'm not on a W-2. And so underwriting, literally wants to sniff up my ass all the way back to, the time I was in my mom's womb in order to get a fucking mortgage. And I'm like, no. Everything. And I'm like, no, I make this much money. It's more than enough. I'm not asking for a lot. Give me the friggin' note. And they won't do it. Yeah. And some of that is because of the way Sarbanes-Oxley was written and the way Dodd-Frank was written. It was all written with the purpose of making it nearly impossible for small business owners to get mortgages in a reasonable time frame if they had any kind of complications in their income stream whatsoever. And so we overcorrected to the point of creating this nightmare. And so the only way people, and then let's not even get into the fact that, now we're talking about loan to value ratios and, how much money they have to put down and blah, 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 blah. When you start to really look at like all of this stuff, like who the hell's got 20% to put down on a house?
If I'm not mistaken, I believe it was Bill Clinton, maybe it was under Reagan, but I think it was under Bill Clinton that they also really wanted to kind of push for this home ownership, which sort of led to that housing bubble. But part of it was because they felt like Americans should own property and there should be that sort of pride of ownership there.
Well, I mean, pride of ownership property ownership is how you build generational wealth. And
right.
I'm going to be started about property taxes. So that's another thing that's nascent here, that we finally get rid of property taxes and the 1,000-year-old feudalism brought in by William the Conqueror to England and to the West. Like, this is evil. We're still like, we should not be paying rent to the government when we own our home.
Right.
Like that. I mean, I'm still libertarian enough to believe that taxes are theft. I'm not like, you're not going to lie to you, but like, property taxes are still the original sin of government. Like, you should not have to pay rent to the government. That's feudalism, folks.
Yeah.
Like, call it what it is. It's not paying for the fucking school system. It's feudalism.
Yeah. It takes me back to the video piece I was talking from Charlie Kirk, where he said that happy people, grateful people don't get behind Vladimir Lenin or Chavez or Castro. People that own nothing, that feel like their property is diminishing, they don't own property or their dollar is diminishing in value, they start to look for alternatives. And so that was Charlie Kirk saying that. And so kind of to your point, it's like giving them homes so they have that ownership, and then the other side is taking that away. I want to continue with this plan that you've laid out because I have a couple questions about that. And so I want to talk about Trump's ability to get this done. You were talking about, some of these things he's doing with the Supreme Court. But before I ask you that question, again, this week, China had this landmark military parade. A lot of quotes and stuff were coming out of that. One thing I saw in Political Magazine, they said that the Pentagon's plan is now changed, and now they're prioritizing homeland over the China threat.
It's deeper than that.
So is this the game board being redrawn?
I do believe fundamentally that the name change around the Department of Defense to the Department of War is in order to literally use the legalese to say the Department of Defense, which no longer exists, no longer has to operate under the 2018 National Defense Authorization Act, which was re-upped in 2022. The name change is important. It's like, it's like all the contracts that were written against the Gulf of, all the treaties that they were issued against the Gulf of Mexico. Well, we changed the name to the Gulf of America, so you know what I mean? Like, you two can play the legalese game, folks, and and
I hadn't thought about that.
This has like Stephen Miller written all over it, folks. I'm dead serious when I say this. Is like, Miller is like clearly the guy who's in charge of the Gantt chart over at Trump Central, which is opposing the Gantt chart over at Evil Corp Central, right? The Microsoft project files of all the stuff that while they advance their plans, the Trump is advancing his, and they're playing their games, and sometimes they win one and sometimes Trump wins one. It's the way war works, folks. And if you're uncomfortable with it, it's the foxhole. Like, you can dig it deeper if you want, but eventually you're going to have to fight. What
does the name change mean?
The name change then gives them the say they don't have to follow the NDAA, and the NDAA said the Department of Defense must prepare to fight a two-front war against Russia and China. That's not what we're doing anymore. Now we are prioritizing locking down the Western Hemisphere. Now, I said back in November when Marco Rubio was nominated to be Secretary of State, everybody's like, he's at neocons and Israelis first, and they focus on all that stuff. And they forget that Phone Party Marco is really well liked around Central and South America. And that was quite an open geopolitical statement to the Chinese and the Russians that we are getting prepared to extricate ourselves from the British Mackinder-esque tall poppy syndrome problem of keeping all of Asia
open,
a mess so that nobody can rise, and retrenching and refocusing our efforts to creating Fortress North in the Western Hemisphere. It's like, this is our area. Y'all have your area. I don't care and we don't care what happens to Europe. We want out of NATO. We want out of the UN. But we can't say any of that. He can't do that directly while you've got these old guard. When you've got Mitch McConnell's and Lisa Murkowski's in the Senate, they will get together and they will impeach him. But they can't impeach him if he doesn't state that that's what he's going to do. You know what I mean? You have to play the game of what's said or what's being done and what's said. That's politics. And there's no way that Chuck Schumer and company can impeach Trump over what? Not wanting to go to war with Ukraine, with Russia over Ukraine, not wanting to, make the American people unsafe and the targets of a potential Russian nuclear weapon or 70? Really? You want to impeach him for that? How about no? It's what we voted for. They keep asking us over and over and over again, did you vote for this? I'm like, yeah, kind of. No, actually, I really voted for that. And so that's the game. And when you understand the game, and I thought people understood politics better than this, but apparently not. I don't know. I'm not. This isn't focused to you, Mark. This is in general. I watch people on a day-to-day basis. I watch people who are supposed to be astute political commentators not get this basic concept. We used to have reasonable political debate in this country. I used to watch crosstalk with them, and I used to watch the McLaughlin group with Buchanan and the rest of them. And yeah, half of them were morons, especially that Eleanor, whatever the hell her name was, not Eleanor. She was terrible. But at the very least, they knew shit.
Yeah.
Right? She could hold her own against Buchanan, even if she was hateful. But, watching the McLaughlin group, today we've got nothing. We've got a bunch of, talking monkeys,
So we get back if we get back to the plan, we're talking about revaluing the U.S.'s assets, which would, I guess, potentially then lead to revaluing the gold. Talking about changing the structure, the game board of the U.S., sort of retrenching back to the Western Hemisphere. You talked about Trump's sort of narrow margin of victory in the House and the Senate. A lot of that could be maybe resolved through this new Senate census that's being pushed through and sort of redistricting. All those lines. But I guess my question is, that's a pretty tall order to get done in the next 3 years.
It is. It's a lot to get done.
And you think
not everything is going to get done in the next 3 years. No. You've got to get through the midterms. You get through the midterms with a real durable majority in the House and the Senate. And a lot of stuff can get done in the next 2 years. What Trump can do before he leaves is to set the foundation in place. Besson is clearly setting the foundation in place to overhaul, bring the Treasury more central to the monetary transmission system, sidelining the Fed to some extent. I think he and Powell are both agreed in the long run that the Fed has to be returned to its pre-Banking Act of 1935 roots, right? Or at the very least, if not to that, then to a version of the Fed that is not involved. It only safeguards the Treasury market from the international perspective, but the domestic Treasury market is under the purview of the Treasury and how that demand is maintained. And then the Fed's job is to backstop the commercial paper market domestically, backstop the international value of the dollar internationally, and walk away from all of its other responsibilities. That would be a perfectly reasonable, situation for the Federal Reserve for the next transition period, for the next decade or generation or whatever. After that, you and I can have a conversation if I'm not dead of a heart attack. So, because I don't think I don't know how much longer we'll see. I just don't, I don't see myself living past 75, 77 years old. I just don't. So I think but that's the timeline. So what you're doing now is you're setting up the durable political advantage to two things. You redistrict states left and right. The Democrats lose people left and right. This is, I think if Charlie Kirk and Irina Zarutska, I think that's how you pronounce her name, if they have any staying power as symbols, it will be for everybody to stand up and go, okay, that's enough. No more. We have work to do, and it's time to move on. Yesterday when I was doing the market report yesterday, right before I sat down and hit record, so I was popping through my Slack server and somebody had posted this AI. I was clearly an AI picture of a mural of arena up on a tenement wall in like, imagine like Baltimore or whatever.
Yeah.
And I took one look at that, and it was in service of the tweet that went out by some guy who said, I want to raise $500,000 to do art block grants to paint murals of Irina all over the United States. And then Elon Musk comes in and says, I pledge $1 million.
Yeah, I saw that.
And I went, that's how you handle this. Oh, yeah. Oh, no. You absolutely beat the living shit out of anybody that is going to treat another woman like anywhere close to what how that animal treated her. Like, we have to step up as men and say we're willing to protect our women, and we're no longer going to indulge in the erasure of women and the erasure of men from our society by blending them into some, non-binary melange of purple hairs and tattoos. Fuck off. No, we're not doing that. That is not the world that any of us want to live in. And what that means is, it's like that. I don't know. When's the last time you watched Schindler's List? Do you remember the end of Schindler's List?
No, tell me.
During as we get to after the movie is over and we move forward into the future and we move into the present, and all the surviving Schindler Jews come walking over, and they just film them, paying their respects at his grave. There's one old woman. Every friggin' time I watch this, and I haven't watched it in years because that movie like destroys me. She always walks by. I can just watch that scene over and over again. She just walks by and she pats the grave a couple of times, and it breaks me up every time. That's kind of what we have to do and acknowledge and use this. Like those murals of Arena, if they do get painted around the country, they're going to get, some of them are going to get painted over, but if we use those and we protect those, and every day we take the opportunity to say to ourselves, we walk by them, those who walk by them, take a moment, nod, say a silent prayer or whatever, that's between you and whatever God you may or may not worship. Pat her reverently once or twice, and they go, enough is enough, and you move, and you're not going to let that happen again. If we all do that, this fixes itself in the long run.
Yeah.
We have to be both firm, be willing to put violence on the table, and use the threat of violence to say, that's it. No more. Everybody's talking about this friggin' communist Mamdani in New York. Me, if I was in New York, I'd be voting for Curtis Sliwa of the Guardian Angels. I remember when we both had hair. That guy has done yeoman's work for New York for 40 years. So, from my perspective, that's kind of our mindset. It's where it has to be. We have to be both. We have to be resolute, willing to forgive if necessary, and willing to beat people and put them down like a rabid dog if they're not. That's where we need to be. We need to be prepared to do all of those things at the same time and do it dispassionately. And if it's an image of Charlie Kirk or it's an image of Irina or whoever it is, fine. Whatever motivates you to get up for the game that day. I'm good with it, because they used George Floyd to burn our cities to the freaking ground and to make us pay for it.
Oh, yeah.
As a humiliation ritual. Never forgive that. Ever. Ever. Now let's move forward.
Yeah.
So, the assets are right here, Mark. It's how we use those assets. But we got to get all of the bullshit out of our way so that we can actually go out there and create. And they don't want us to create. They want us weak. They want us divided. They want us afraid. They want us angry at some other guy. I'm not angry at black people. I ain't angry at... No, I know exactly who I'm angry at.
Yeah.
And they woke up a lot of people yesterday.
Yeah, they did. And they're all going one direction.
Yep.
They're all going one direction. And so I think we're going to wrap it up with that, Tom. That was a great way to sort of put a pin in it.
Thank you.
You laid out the case. You gave us the catalyst. And hopefully this momentum will keep going. Tom, you're a wealth of information. Like I said, when we first started, as fate would have it, you're probably the perfect person to talk to today. Gold, Goats, and Guns is your podcast. Everyone should go download that. You have the newsletter. We're going to link to that down below. Anything else people should be paying attention to?
Just my Twitter feed where the worst version of me will show up every day. I promise, because I'm in charge of it.
All right, Tom, we're going to...
It's the TFL1728 on Twitter.
Yeah, TFL. All right, we'll link to that down in the show notes down below. Thanks so much, Tom.
Thank you, Mark. Have a great day. It was good catching up with you, man.